Now that we've discussed claim and we've practiced it in class with more activities and gone over the exercises from the book, we're going to look at this idea next of what is a thesis statement. Now, you've been writing thesis statements for several years now with this idea of being a roadmap for your arguments within your essay and showing what exactly you're going to write about. Now, the thesis statement is going to start to change shape a little bit because we're now going to look at the fact that there are actually three different types of thesis statements. There's a closed thesis, an open thesis, and a counter-argument thesis. Now, when we look at each of these, I would take notes and write down the samples that I'm giving you. The Harry Potter examples are actually in the textbook, but then the traveling examples are not. So I would write down both just so that you can get that grasp of them better within your notes. Now, if you look in the book on page 95, you'll actually see at the very top, before it starts talking about this idea of a closed thesis statement, the idea of what a thesis is supposed to be. Now, it is in a formal essay that we write these for class. A claim is traditionally stated explicitly as a one-sentence thesis statement that appears in the introduction of your argument. Now, so that still fits with our basic format. It goes in the introduction, it's a single sentence, and our thesis is now turning into the claim aspect of our essay. Remembering we've done analysis essays when we did the Death of a Moth essay, and the thesis that you wrote basically was a claim style of thesis. You were writing with this idea that you were stating that syntax and diction were used for a certain purpose. Now, keeping that in mind, we're going to do the same style within here. So the first style we're going to look at is this idea of a closed thesis. On page 95, it defines it. It says that this specifically implies the word because. Now, this is the style that we already use normally in class, where it usually has the three aspects and the three parts to it. So let's look at the example from the textbook and look at this a little deeper. The three-dimensional characters, exciting plot, and complex themes of the Harry Potter series make them not only legendary children's books, but enduring literary classics. Now, the idea here is that the author is claiming that these three things, three-dimensional characters, an exciting plot, and complex themes, all join together, and that these are the reasons why, or because, the book is an enduring literary classic. Now, the idea here is that when you are writing a closed thesis, you are giving very specific examples that we look at. Okay, this is what you are very used to writing. Now, looking at a more simplistic aspect, when we look at this idea of traveling. My three favorite places to travel are Paris, Las Vegas, and London. Now, taking the complexity of the Harry Potter one and making it very simple will hopefully help you to see the fact that this is the style that you have been writing. But I want you to start writing more like the Harry Potter style. So yes, it gives the 3 points of Paris, Las Vegas, and London, and it closes in your example and keeps it into this idea of these are the three things you're going to talk about. These thesis statements are used for what would be our basic 5-paragraph essay. Now, since we're trying to go away from that and come into a different style, this is where we're starting to open up to different styles of thesis statements. Now, the next style is what we have called is an open thesis. Now, the open thesis is this idea that it does not list all of the points that the writer intends to discuss. These are very popular and used when you have more than 3 aspects to discuss. So if you have 6, 7, 8, 9 things, and this is where you get into your essays, they can easily be 10, 15, and 20 pages in length because you have so many different aspects to discuss. So this usually, like it says here, is when there's more than 3, and it is very much this idea of a much longer essay. Now, looking at the Harry Potter sample from the book, the popularity of the Harry Potter series demonstrates that simplicity trumps complexity when it comes to the taste of readers, both young and old. So the author of this one is claiming that the idea of the simplicity versus the complexity goes along with the taste of the readers. And it doesn't matter the age of the readers. but it shows that idea of simplicity and complexity all in one. It doesn't list the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 things that the author is going to talk about, but everything the author talks about is going to come back to this idea of simplicity and complexity. Now, taking this back to the travel one, to see this idea of what you're used to writing, I have many favorite places to travel. Now this goes and it claims that I have favorite places to travel, but it leaves out the places, because now instead of it just being the 3 that I previously mentioned, now maybe I want to discuss 7 or 8 of them. But it still goes along with that idea of being simple. And again, looking at this idea that even though this is what you've been used to writing about with the travel thesis, we're going more towards this idea of the Harry Potter thesis. Now, the final type of thesis that we have is this idea of a counter-argument. When we've looked at Unit 1, we've been looking at this idea of counter-arguments and how we actually focus them within the text itself. So we've talked about refutations and we've talked about concessions within the argument itself. Now we're going to look at how do you actually put a counter-argument thesis statement together. So how do you, when you're writing an argumentative essay, actually put the counter-argument as part of your main essay itself, as part of your thesis, because you don't have to save it just for the body paragraphs. You can actually mention it and carry it throughout the essay, showing that you have a stronger handle on both sides of the argument itself, but then in the end, in your conclusion, showing why the other one is better than the counter argument. Now, a counter-argument, looking at the text itself on page 96, states that a summary of a counter-argument usually qualified by although or but precedes the writer's opinion. So keeping in mind this when we're looking at this idea of the placement of the words themselves. So looking at the Harry Potter one from the book on page 96. Although the Harry Potter series may have some literary merit, its popularity has less to do with storytelling than with merchandising. Now, the idea here of although and its placement goes with this idea of the counter-argument itself. The author of this is stating that even though this is the counter-argument, even though it has some literary merits, this second part is what they're actually going to be arguing. They're going to be arguing the idea that its popularity has to do with storytelling versus with merchandising, or has less to do with storytelling than with merchandising. So looking at both aspects of this is important. So they're laying this idea of literary merit versus this idea of popularity. So the idea of popularity is what they're going to discuss versus this idea of literary merit. Now with the travel one, although traveling can be costly, I love to travel to a variety of locations. Now this idea here with the counter arguments, talking about this idea of traveling being costly versus this idea of my main argument, which I'm going to discuss in the essay, would be this idea of traveling to a variety of locations. So that although, again, like it was with the Harry Potter one, shows that idea that you're seeing the counter argument itself. Now this is important to note and pay attention to. So going back to that main idea that you're going to look for the ideas of although or but at the beginning of the thesis statement to actually see that aspect. Now for the homework, if you look back on page 94 and you look in the essay in progress box where it says this idea of staking a claim, we're taking that argument even further. We've already come up with 2 ideas, we've narrowed it down to 1 idea, and now you're going to take this idea of staking a claim and you're going to put it within the context of your essay. And the idea of if you were to write this essay, what you would actually write as your claim. So now you're going to take your 2 choices, you're going to narrow it down to 1, and then you're going to write 3 different claims that you could possibly focus on within your essay. Remember to continue doing this on the separate page that we're calling Essay in Progress, not as part of your notes, because at the end of the chapter you will actually be turning this whole Essay in Progress in for a grade. So tomorrow we will be sharing some of the claims within the topics, and then part of what you're going to be doing tomorrow night is you're going to start then to take those claims and focus them into thesis statements. In class tomorrow we will practice more with the thesis statements and go further in depth with other examples and do a group activity to help emphasize this. Have a good night.